Now, I know this week is finals week, and usually I don't do recordings during finals week because I usually spend most of the time this week studying final exam or do group project that is going to be part of my final exam in my courses. But since yesterday there was a big news come out of MLS of them potentially reviewing a date that they are going to return this season. That's why I want to make a video about that, and I also want to do a little bit of a news of the week video too, because it's been a while since I have done a news of the week video, and I want to keep you guys updated in terms of the latest news that has happened around MLS during this pandemic situation. But before we actually get to the other news, let's actually talk about the biggest news, as I just mentioned, is that MLS potentially could be reviewing a date that they are going to be restarting their season, and that they actually propose a plan to bring all 2016 to the Orlando area to continue its season. And they have a schedule where every single team will be start doing individual training in the Orlando area starting in June 1st, and then the very next week they will have small group training with all 26 of these teams, and then they're going to have a full group training the following week after they have a small group training before, as they think this is going to be the date that they're going to restart, which is June 22nd, is when they actually are going to start having matches and restarting the season in Orlando. Now, most of these games that is going to be taking place once the season restart is going to be at the ESPN World Complex of Sports, which is the same stadium that was, well, not really the stadium, but the same complex that was used during the Skills Challenge in last year's All-Star game. And there are a couple of factors that they mention of how this is going to work besides the schedule that they lay out in terms of this proposed plan. So all 26 of these teams will be playing in the soccer complex and potentially playing in other stadium around the Orlando area. Each of these players are going to have to take a 20% pay cut, which a couple of days back there was a report that MLS is trying to convince the MLS Players Association to agree to take a 20% pay cut because of this whole pandemic. And this proposed plan basically include that. And then there is another factor where they said that family members will not be allowed to visit each of these players that is going to be playing in these kind of mini tournament to restart the season in the Orlando area. Now, I know as much as this plan definitely is an ideal plan, and I know a lot of fans, including myself, that really want MLS to get back as quick as possible, there are definitely some issue with this proposal. The biggest issue, I think, isn't really the 20% pay cut, because I'm assuming, I know players, they don't want to have a 20% pay cut to their salary, but at the same time, there's an argument of why they want to do that, and that is because they would rather take a 20% pay cut than actually take a whole season without earning any salary during their career. But there's also the factor that no family members are allowed to visit these players doing whenever they are going to be doing their training and their tournament in the Orlando area. And having to not able to visit your families during a pandemic time is definitely not ideal, and I doubt that the MLSPA would really want that to happen, but we shall see whether or not if that is going to be the case, and whether or not if there is an agreement that this is going to be the plan it will go through. Again, I think moving forward, as I mentioned last week, whatever MLS is going to do in terms of restarting their season, it's going to be at a neutral venue, most likely. It's going to be in a tournament style, and most likely these games are going to be played behind closed door, which is going to be something that has happened. Oh, and speaking of another problem with this proposal, since this is taking place in Orlando, and you know how Orlando in the summer is probably one of the worst area to play soccer in terms of the heat and humidity, a lot of these games going to have to be played either at the nighttime or it has to play during a time when it's not like 90-degree with like 40% humidity whatsoever. And these soccer complex, most of these soccer complex doesn't really has any shades whatsoever, so these players are just going to get completely exposed by the sunlight and the humidity around the area. So that could be another problem of the fact that you're going to have to play these games at nighttime, and there's just no way in the world these players are going to agree playing in like 90-degree 60-70% humidity at 4 in the afternoon in Orlando. So yeah, that could be another factor into this. But again, despite the fact that there's a lot of factor into it, we shall see whether or not if the players would agree to do this, and whether MLS will push for this. But either way, once the season resumes, this is going to be something similar that we are going to see whenever the season is going to return. Now, another big news that came out of MLS, and this actually came out of today, is the whole development academy situation. Because remember a couple of weeks ago when the U.S. Development Academy decided to shut its doors, and it creates a lot of question in terms of these teams that used to be in the U.S. Development Academy, and where are they going to go now? Well, at least for 65 of these teams that were part of the U.S. Development Academy, they will now have a new home called the MLS Elite Player Development Platform, because MLS have just announced that they are going to have 95 clubs to join force in this program, and that this is pretty much the same thing as the MLS Development Academy. And as I said, there's going to be 65 of these 95 teams that were part of the old U.S. Development Academy, and they'll also be joining the other 30 team. Most of them will be making up of MLS clubs to be in this development program. Now, I have also heard that this development program requires every single MLS team to at least field a U15 and U17 team, although there is multiple category of each of these teams and how many they can, of course, field around. So we shall see how that is going to work. And the other thing that we will also see how this new program is going to work is what exactly the format is going to be. I read the article and talk about how they're introducing this program, but I didn't hear anything about how the structure and how the scheduling is going to work. I'm assuming they'll probably do what they did with the U.S. Development Academy, which is, they will have different division and different conference, and each of these conference will, depending on geographical point, and they want to do that so that some of these teams doesn't have to travel all the way across the other side of the country to play a development academy match. And that I know MLS would not want to have a development academy match that these young players from the development academy is going to have to travel so far to play game. It's just a hassle and a logistic nightmare in terms of that. Now, there is also another big news came out, not around MLS, but really in general in terms of the world of football, where there is now going to be a 5 substitution rule that is now officially approved by the IFAB, and this rule basically means that you can now have you can have 5 substitution per game instead of just having 3 substitute per game. And again, I think I mentioned this rule a couple of weeks back in the news of the week, where I think this is a nice rule, knowing that there is going to be a lot of games that is going to be playing in a short amount of time, knowing the fact that a lot of these leagues around the world, once they restart the season, they want to just not only get the season restarted, but they want to play as much game as possible in a short amount of period. And because of that, you need to have more substitute that is going to be come on into this game, because that means you can at least get some of these players a little bit more rest. But I think this 5 substitution rule can also impact in terms of the tactics of how each team is going to be, because now when you have 5 substitute available, do you actually make substitution much more earlier in the game? And are we going to see kind of like in these kind of exhibition or in these kind of friendly match where you see like just a wholesale changes that has happened at halftime? Are we gonna see something similar to that now? The 5 substitution rule is gonna happen, but anyway, this is definitely a game changer, and it will be very interesting to see how each of these teams is going to adapt. Although I also have heard that this 5 substitution rule is only a temporary thing, so once this whole pandemic is going to be over, and once the season will, most of the soccer league season is going to get back to normal, are we still going to have the 5 substitution rule, or is it just going to be a free substitution rule like we always seen before? LA County have decided to keep the stay-at-home orders to July, and this came right after where I have heard a lot of protests that is going around Southern California, and really in general California, where people are kind of pissed off the fact that they have to comply to the stay-at-home order, and that they feel like this whole stay-at-the-home order has pretty much violated their rights of freedom. Now, I'm not going to go as far as that, because if I want to go as far as that, it's going to turn very political. But again, I think as much as I know people are going to be upset the fact that they're going to have to comply with the shelter-in-place order for another two months, it is the way it is. I mean, as long as if we don't really have if we don't have kind of a knowledge of when can we decide to end the shelter-in-place order, or if we don't have a knowledge of the fact that if we do open too quickly, then there could be like some consequences that is going to happen. Actually, that's not really if we don't have any knowledge. We know that could be a possibility where if you open things way too quickly, there could be definitely some serious consequences, like a second wave of this COVID-19 pandemic. So I guess LA County is just kind of playing it safe and trying to keep the stay-at-home order until July. But after that, we shall see whether or not if they're going to extend it. Like, I already heard that they are planning to not have any sporting events or any kind of large gathering events until next year. So I expect that there's not going to be a lot of LAFC or LA Galaxy game that is going to be taking place, or at least it's going to be taking place with a large amount of people, if that is what the county is going for. Now, moving on in terms of the next news, and talk a little bit about transfer news. FC Dallas still expect Franco Jara to arrive in July, and the reason why they said that he's expected to arrive is that there is a contract that says that he signed a pre-contract and that he is going to arrive in July. Now, because we are under this pandemic and because the transfer rule is all screwed up because of this, it'll be interesting to see how that is going to work out, and whether or not if Pachuca is going to kind of honor that system, or they're just going to say that, yes, it says that we're supposed to let you have Franco Jara in July, but at the same time, because of this whole pandemic, and we were expected to end our season in July, are we now going to say that, well, you can't have him until the Apertura season is going to be over, and then you can of course have Franco Jara. I don't know how that is gonna do. This all depends on how are they going to fix the whole transfer rule situation right now. I mean, I haven't heard any news that they have changed the transfer rule that is happening, other than the fact that they are of course stopping the whole transfer window that is going on in MLS, and there's no actual transfer that is going on between MLS and the rest of the league in the world. Now, DC United says that they have ended their pursuit to get Bobby Wood from Hamburg, and this is actually the first time I have heard that they were trying to get Bobby Wood from Hamburg. I mean, I heard Bobby Wood has been linked to go to an MLS club, but I didn't think DC United was one of those players. And I guess it's not surprising the fact that they need Bobby Wood to come to their club and join their club, because striker is one of the biggest weakness that DC United has. They only have one real striker, that is Ola Kamara, and then there is really a big question mark of who exactly is going to be the next striker, and that if Kamara does get injured, what are you going to do? There's not really a true striker that's going to play that number 9 position. So that's why they really want to get an extra striker. And I'm not quite sure if Bobby Wood might be a guy that can fit in as that second striker. And obviously now they feel like that is not going to be happening because they have ended their pursuit to potentially get Bobby Wood from Hamburg. But lastly, in terms of this news of the week, I am going to quickly show you guys the result from Week 11 simulated match. I know this week I didn't do a review in terms of match Week 11 in terms of the simulated action, but that's because, again, this is finals week, and I usually don't do recordings, and this is only a special kind of occasion where I actually do recordings, and that this is just such a big news surround MLS that I feel like people need to really kind of hear about and kind of know when exactly the league is going to be back this season. But in terms of the whole review, I wasn't able to do that on Monday. So now I'm just going to quickly kind of read off what has happened in terms of these results. And there was definitely some surprises in terms of these 13 games that happened on week number 11. And we start off with the first game that actually had a big surprise, which is the Red Bulls winning 3-0 against FC Cincinnati. So FC Cincinnati was definitely, they, even though they did lose their last game, they still have pretty good momentum and are above the red line. And they were facing against a Red Bulls team that was dead last, but it seemed like the Red Bulls decided that they were tired of being in dead last and just completely destroyed FC Cincinnati in this game, and now somehow in some way the Red Bulls are above the red line, which later on I'm actually going to tell you guys in terms of the standings after 11 weeks of simulated match action, as I unfortunately couldn't fit it on the board here. But the very next match, we didn't see an upset because Orlando City was able to easily dispatch Houston in this game by a final score of 3-0. Then we saw the Galaxy, who this season, they have been very inconsistent, and their inconsistency show again where they were able to win 3-2 against a Rapids team that is also another team that is kind of a little bit inconsistent, as later on I will reveal how both of these teams are going to have opposite result of what happened in this game. Now in the next match, we had the Columbus Crew and Montreal drawing 1-1. Then we have Sporting KC continue to revitalize themselves and continue to charge up the Western Conference by winning 3-0 against TFC. DC United then drew 1-1 against the Dynamo before FC Cincinnati was able to rebound after that tough loss against the Red Bulls by winning 3-0 against New England. Then in the match of the week between two of the heavyweights in MLS, that is Orlando City and Minnesota, it's Minnesota continue to show why they are the best team in the league by a country mile by winning 3-1 against the Lions in this game. Then the very next match, we kind of had a bit of an upset, which, it's kind of weird saying upset in the word of in the same sentence as an Atlanta United victory, because you would always think Atlanta is the favorites whenever they win a game, but that wasn't the case when they play against a Union team that was in the top of the Eastern Conference, and they were able to Atlanta United was able to take them down by winning 3-2 on the road in this game. So very impressive victory for Atlanta, even though they look like they were probably going to lose this game against the team that is at the top of the table. Speaking of top of the table, one team that is near the top of the table are the closest ones to challenge Minnesota in the top of the table in the Western Conference, that is Real Salt Lake, able to get a 2-0 victory against a Timber side that is continued to struggle this season. Speaking of struggle, that's what the Quakes are this season, and surprisingly they only lost 1-0 to LAFC, although I guess it's not really surprising considering LAFC has really struggled in the past week, and this win was a much needed win for LAFC. Like, they had to stop this underachieving that they have been going through in the last couple of weeks, and they finally did it by winning against the Quakes. Although, again, anytime when you are playing against the Quakes, it's pretty much an automatic 3 points nowadays, and LAFC luckily was able to get that automatic 3 points, and now let's see if they can actually start to get back to where they should be belong, which is near the top of the Western Conference. Then in the very next match, we had a little bit of a surprising result with the Rapids winning 2-1 against a Seattle Sounders team that is started to kind of fade away a little bit in these last couple of weeks, and are kind of struggling a little bit, before finishing off with the Red Bulls, another impressive win against a Galaxy team that is, again, a very inconsistent team, and a team that, for whatever reason, whenever they play a game at home, they always struggle, and that whenever they go on the road, for whatever reason, they look like they're the best team in the league. But that being said, I am now going to show you guys the standings, as I actually didn't have the window of the standings on my computer, so now I'm going to have to search up that article that has all the simulated match. This is only going to take a couple of seconds. There it is. So I'm going to read you guys the standings after 11 weeks of MLS action. And we'll start off with the Eastern Conference standing, also known as the clusterfuck standing, because there is still no separation between third place all the way down to last place in the Eastern Conference. But we start off with the two best team that is kind of separate the pack, that is the Philadelphia Union at 22 points, and then Orlando City, who is able to gain some ground gain a little bit of ground after getting more points than the Union this week, are only 2 points behind them with 20 points. Then we begin the clusterfuck known as 3rd through 12th, with FC Cincinnati, Atlanta tie with 14 points apiece. Then you got TFC and DC United and the Red Bulls tied with 13 points in 5th place. You got the New England Revolution and Montreal tied with 11 points, NYCFC with 10 points, Chicago Fire with 9 points, and Columbus Crew with 9 points apiece. And again, 3rd through 12th is still only separated by 5 points, and that they just showed that as long as if you can get some winning streak that is going to happen, then you can definitely charge up the table. And that if you're one of those teams that is in the top of this clusterfuck, if you started to struggle, then yeah, you are expected to drop not only below the red line, but might find yourself near the basement of the Eastern Conference. Now, while the Eastern Conference has been kind of a clusterfuck, the Western Conference isn't really that, and that there seems to be a huge gap, of course, which is clearly shown in the first spot that Minnesota currently owns, which has 32 points, and that they're the only team in the league to have reached the 30-plus point margin. Then it's followed by RSL that is just 8 points adrift of Minnesota in that top spot of the Western Conference with 24 points. And then you have Seattle also with a little bit of a gap and a distance from RSL in 2nd place with 19 points in 3rd. Then you have LAFC started to climb back up a little bit with 17 points as the Rapids, who's currently in 5th place, also have 17 points apiece. Then you got SKC continue to charge up the Western Conference by placing 6th here and have 16 points, while tying with the Galaxy, who currently owns the last spot of the playoffs in the Western Conference with also 16 points apiece. Then you have Dallas with 14 points in 8th place, the Dynamo with 11 points, the Timbers with 10 points, the Earthquakes with 7, and you finish off at the bottom of the Western Conference and the worst team in the league right now, that is the Vancouver Whitecaps with only 5 points to its name. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for my news of the week, and also kind of like my quick recap of the simulated match that happened in match week number 11. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if there's any news that I missed on this board, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.